Hey divas, welcome to my channel. So season 3 of Squid Game recently dropped on Netflix on June 27th and I was very excited. I was very disappointed when season 2 ended because I wanted to know what happened, obviously, as one does when a season ends. I was so very excited. I watched it right when it came out. Squid Game is honestly just one of my favorite shows. It's interesting, it's heartbreaking, it's horrifying, but I do think it's very well written and suspenseful, and it does serve to show the things people will do when they're desperate to get out of situations. Especially with season 2, I think it's really fascinating to see how many people continue to vote to keep playing. Even after they witness all of this, they think that they'll survive and they don't really care what happens to the rest of the people because they want to earn more money. Because in season 1, they all did get the chance to leave if the majority voted to leave. But then after that, I feel like they were more so kind of stuck. They definitely didn't vote between each round like that. Something I did for the first 2 seasons of Squid Game was I combined it with my childhood favorite show and still comfort show, Victorious, and I discussed how I felt the characters in Victorious would do if they were recruited in Squid Games or if they were like in a Squid Games scenario and playing the games. And so of course I wanted to carry on with that tradition and discuss how I think the characters of Victorious would do if they were partaking in the games in Squid Game season 3. Now, I did discuss how I thought that they would do in the games in season 2, and I know that season 3 is just an extension of season 2, like it picks up exactly where it left off. It's not a new year of the games or anything, but I am just starting fresh with the characters for this video, assuming they would have survived the first 3 games, disregarding any deaths I would have decided in the season 2 video, because it is a new season, so I wanted to just start fresh and discuss how I think the characters would do in the 4th, 5th, and 6th games of Squid Game. Also, of course, as a disclaimer, I don't wish death upon the characters or the actors who portray them. I genuinely love the whole cast of Victorious so much. I just thought this was an interesting concept, and obviously they are characters and this isn't real. I just think it's fascinating to combine the two. So obviously I'm not wishing death upon anyone. This is just a fun little scenario. And as usual, the characters that we're going to be using for this are Tori, Andre, Beck, Trina, Kat, Robbie. Did I say Trina? Trina and Sinjin. All of them. I contemplated discussing how they would do in the voting in between each game as well, but I think at this point we are still going to assume that they survived the first 3 games. At this point, I think that I'll be voting to end the games. I don't think any of them would really want to continue because they'd see all the harm it's causing, and especially if they survived the big like fight and everything that, you know, picked up as season 2 ended, I think they'd be done playing the games. So we're not really discussing the voting, but of course the majority of other people voted to continue, so we start at the 4th game, or the first game for this video, which is hide and seek. Ever since the first season of Squid Game, I thought that hide and seek would be such an interesting one to have them do, and I wasn't disappointed with the way it played out. I mean, I was, in the sense that like my favorite trio all died and that wasn't fun, but like it was good. It was suspenseful. And of course, throughout this game, players randomly are given a blue or a red ball from what looks like a giant gumball machine, where red deems you a seeker and blue deems you a hider, and you have to take those roles, and you either have to hide for 30 minutes or find the exit and survive, or you have to be a seeker and kill somebody to pass. So it's quite literally kind of either kill or be killed. And obviously it would have been very easy for me to just rig this exactly the way I wanted and be like, oh, Jade's a seeker for sure, Tori's a hider for sure. It would be very easy for me to just choose what I wanted and what would work best in the character's favor, but that's not always how it happened in real life. So I actually did randomize it to determine who would be what, as if they were actually playing. So Tori was a seeker, Andre was a hider, Jade was a seeker, Robbie was a hider, Beck was a seeker, Trina was a seeker, Kat was a hider, and Sinjin was a hider. However, the players were given the opportunity to swap roles before the game began if they found somebody on the other side who was willing to swap with them. So I obviously decided that would be an option for the victorious characters as well. However, I do think a lot of them would be not necessarily content, but they'd take the roles that they were assigned. Jade and Beck, I think, would definitely prefer the seeker role, and they would kind of protect their friends who were hiding. And I don't obviously think they'd be thrilled about killing somebody, but I think they do what had to be done to survive, and they definitely either choose somebody who was harming their friends or somebody who wasn't a very good player to begin with. I feel like Robbie would want to be a seeker because he's scared of being a hider, but I also think everyone would be scared of him being a seeker as well because they wouldn't think that he could actually kill anybody. I think Kat would be more than happy and confident in her ability to hide. I think Trina would put on an act as if she was perfectly happy being a seeker and like she got the better option, but obviously she would actually be terrified because the idea of having to kill somebody like that is a lot. And I feel like with a lot of the other games, the death isn't like directly at their hands, like they lose or something, but like it's not, you know, like a deliberate like killing. So trading, I feel like, wouldn't be off the table for her. And I know Tori would also be doubting her ability to kill. And so for Robbie, Trina, and Tori, the characters who I think would even be interested in swapping, I decided to once again spin a wheel to see if they found somebody to swap with them or not. Starting with Robbie, he would stay a hider. Trina is also keeping her role as a seeker, but Tori ended up switching with somebody and became a hider, which I do think is very probable. I definitely think there is somebody who would have wanted to switch off and become a seeker. So now for hiders, we have Tori, Andre, Robbie, Kat, and Sinjin. And for seekers, we have Jade, Beck, and Trina. Which does suck for them since a lot of people they care about are hiders, but I feel like they could also protect them. And there's so many other people in the games, obviously. I think all three of them would definitely vow to protect their friends. Even Jade, even though she puts up a front like she doesn't care, I think her actions have shown otherwise, that she cares for everybody. When she found out that Kat was secretly like sleeping at the school, she cared very much. When Robbie was freaking out because he sold Rex, she genuinely was concerned about his well-being. And I even think her being concerned about Tori being with like Ryder was her caring. She just showed it in a weird way. I feel like Jade would take out either somebody that she just didn't like if there was a player 100 type of person in this game, and then kind of linger around to protect her friends who were still hiding. I don't think she'd kill more than necessity, but I do think she would end up killing another seeker, or at least like fight with them if it came down to it, to protect those that she cares about. So I think she would definitely survive this game. I also don't think that Trina would be thrilled about the kill, but she would do it if she had to. And I think once again, she would either select somebody who everyone kind of mutually doesn't like or wants taken care of, or she would select someone more vulnerable who she felt like didn't have a chance anyways, because I feel like she'd feel like it was the least despicable way to go about it. Trina might have been selfish, but she definitely wasn't evil, and I know that she'd be like a wreck afterwards, but she'd do it to survive. So she'd be a mess, but Trina Vega would survive this game as well. Beck, similarly to Jade, I feel like he would kill just kind of to get it done, and I feel like he would maybe more so lean towards a target who he feels is the biggest threat if he could. And I do think that he would survive this round as well. Obviously, it's easier for the seekers to survive than the hiders. And as for our hiders, I do think Kat would survive, and I think that she would find a very good hiding spot. Like, there's one door that they went through where they'd like drop down and fall, but you could kind of see like a little corner behind the door. I think Kat would easily find a little spot like that. She's obviously a small girl. I think she could fit herself into a small spot really well, and I don't even think she'd be panicking too much. I think she would be having a lot of fun with it, and she'd be kind of disappointed when hiding time was over. So Kat is not only surviving this game, but she is thriving. When it came down to Sinjin, Andre, Robbie, and Tori though, I knew that it would be unlikely that every single character would make it through this round, because there is 4 of them, and there are a lot of seekers out there that are like desperate, and a lot of them aren't just stopping after one kill either. a lot of them were just killing out of necessity and felt bad, but a lot of them were killing to eliminate the other competitors and killing for fun even. So I feel like the 4 of them would be at risk, and it's unrealistic to just be like, nope, they'd all survive, they'd all be fine. But I do genuinely love the characters, so it was hard for me to sit here and be like, oh, Sinjin's dying, or like, oh, Tori's dying. My initial instinct was maybe Sinjin wouldn't make it, especially because I feel like he'd be less guarded than like Kat, Robbie, Tori, and Andre, because he's like in the friend group, but he's not like always in the friend group, you know? And then I'm like, maybe Robbie, because he does kind of have a habit of causing chaos to come to him, but obviously in a life or death situation, I'm like, maybe he would be more careful, or maybe they'd be keeping a closer eye on him. So I decided to leave it up to fate and once again spin a wheel to see who would survive this round, because I could honestly see it going either way for all 4 of them. Obviously Kat's surviving, so she's not included in this. So I put all of the names in the wheel except for the ones who already survived, of course. And since I knew there was a potential that more could die, I did put a spin twice option in there, which obviously if I got spin twice, I'd spin twice and 2 of them would die, but if not, it'd just be the one that it landed on. And as it turned out, the odds were not in Robbie's favor, as he was the one eliminated in this round, which I do think could be an unfortunate reality, since I feel like he definitely would kind of be scrambling and be unsure of where to hide. I think he could accidentally just turn a corner and then there'd be a seeker there who would kill him, something along those lines. But luckily for Andre, Tori, and Sinjin, they were either able to fight or hide long enough to survive the 30 minutes. I definitely think they'd be smart enough to like figure out the keys and figure out that you need to have like multiple, and like obviously I think between the 3 of them there's likely at least 2 of them who have different keys, and they could potentially take the keys off of eliminated players if the seekers hadn't first, and I think they'd figure it out, and I think they'd make it through a good majority of doors. So Jade, Beck, Trina, Sinjin, Tori, Kat, and Andre all made it through the first game, or the 4th game, and we're moving on to the 5th, which is jump rope. This scene was actually very suspenseful to me. Obviously it's kind of like the glass bridge equivalent game, but it was very suspenseful, and I think it was interesting the way like when they get held up, I never expected them to get like held up, and then they just have to keep jumping, essentially a lot of them to their deaths, and I think that was horrifying to watch. And a lot of them are obviously probably injured from the previous round as well. Once again though, not only is Kat passing this, but she is going first, and she is having no problem doing so. She still kind of thinks that this is fun and it's easy for her. And I always reference this episode, but we've seen in the Gorilla Club episode that she obviously has enough agility to be able to survive things like this, and she has more strength than people give her credit for. And she also does have a lot of energy, which I think would work in her favor. I think she would definitely be able to jump across. And she once again would kind of just see it as a fun little game. I do think it, once again, straightforward, like everyone is physically capable of jumping their way across, but I also once again know that it's not realistic for all of them to make it, and there are circumstances that step in the way, like people stopping when they're trying to cross, or people at the other platform, you know, blocking them from getting on. So I decided that in this round, 2 characters would unfortunately meet their end. So once again, I decided to spin a wheel on which characters would meet their end in this round. The first death, unfortunately, was Andre, which is sad, but of course there's many things that could happen. Like I feel like he could easily be crossing and then get blocked and pushed off or something. So now in terms of Tori, Beck, Sinjin, Trina, and Jade, unfortunately the wheel decided that it was Tori's time to go. I think she could have survived, but I also don't think her dying is unrealistic either. I could definitely see her like kind of stopping and trying to give everyone an inspiring speech about how they need to like work together and help each other across, especially if someone's like holding up the platform, but she would unfortunately meet her end. So now Sinjin, Jade, Beck, Kat, and Trina are on to the 6th and final round in this year's edition of Squid Game. They get a nice dinner and they're brought onto the elevators where they're raised up into a big square platform, and they're introduced to the last game, which is Squid Game, which also is just essentially deciding at least one person who's going to get pushed off of the edge. This game was so funny to me because it didn't really seem to have too many rules or regulations. Like, everyone literally just had to agree on someone to push off the edge. Obviously, there could be more than one, but there didn't have to be. Literally just one person had to die per round. Also is once again kind of dependent on how violent everyone is, how they can rationalize things. I do, however, think since there's 5 of them all from the same friend group, that would kind of work to their benefit, because if they did take the approach of like voting for somebody or having a conversation as to who gets eliminated this round, obviously they're not going to vote against each other, and I feel like they would pick a common enemy elsewhere who'd be eliminated. Kind of like how player 100 in this was like having his own group of like 6 or whatever, or 5 other people, being like, oh, the 6 of us can win. Obviously, since like originally he intended on killing off Minsu, Jihan, and then Junhee's baby. In this circumstance, I do think all of them would make it past the square and they would get onto the triangle, which is the second platform. I feel like there would definitely be bound to either be a physically or mentally unfit player that they feel like they could take off instead, or of course a common enemy. But as for the triangle and circles, obviously once again it's kind of dependent on who's with them, and somebody does have to go each round. I could see someone suggesting taking out Trina because I feel like she would be a little bit on the mentally unwell side. Obviously her sister died, several of her friends, the whole game's been traumatizing, and now she's potentially on the brink of death as well. I feel like Jade could have some people resentful of her because she's definitely a bit more of a snarky character. I feel like she'd be giving people attitude, and then they could kind of see her as like unfavorable, or like whoever she killed as a seeker to protect her friends or to pass, you know, she could have resentment. I don't think anyone would necessarily have a personal vendetta against Kat, Beck, or Sinjin, but I also don't think they'd be like fighting for their survival if they weren't as fond of them. Maybe Kat. Maybe someone would be fighting for Kat's survival because she seems to make friends easily, but I don't know. I heavily contemplating saying, okay, they all survived and they split the prize money, but the whole point of Squid Game is, you know, it's not happy. Once again, we left it up to a wheel to decide. So I added all of their names as well as 5 random player options to decide, like, obviously if they went or if a random other player who's with them went. And I did this for both the triangle and the circle platforms, the last 2 platforms. And I'm sad to say this is where Jade was eliminated. As I said, I could have seen it happening because, like, I feel like she had an attitude and someone could just be spiteful and decide to end her life. Obviously, I don't think anyone would vote on it. I think she'd kind of just be pushed off. I feel like it was easier to decide which of them would die in the first few games because it was like more dependent on skill. Like, obviously in like the honeycomb challenge, I could be like, oh yeah, Sinjin or Robbie would go because they're kind of clumsy and they'd break it. But here it's a lot like up to luck, I feel like, because obviously, I mean, a little bit of skill, I guess, but a lot of it is just luck. If you happen to be a hider or you happen to be a seeker, if you happen to hide well enough or have people to protect you, if you're able to jump, if you don't get held up, like, a lot of it's up to luck and not necessarily skill, which makes it so hard to decide. So now all that remains of the group is Kat, Beck, Trina, and Sinjin, and we're on to the final spin to decide if we lose another beloved character or a random person stuck up there with them all. And the result was random. Maybe they decided whoever killed Jade, I don't know, but another random player bit the dust. So that leaves Kat, Beck, Trina, and Sinjin as the winners. Honestly, I'm kind of shocked that Sinjin survived this long, but like, good for him. And I know that maybe having that many winners is a stretch, but technically it was an option. Like, it could have happened. I mean, maybe they would have made up some other rule where more had to die, but, you know, technically they all could have won, I feel like, or more than one player could have won this one, I feel like. So Kat, Beck, Trina, and Sinjin are our winners for this edition of Squid Game. And I feel like they wouldn't let their winning go in vain. I feel like obviously Trina would do something for her sister, Beck would do something for Jade. They'd all like kind of help the families of their friends and stuff. But that is just how I think Squid Game Season 3 would go for the victorious characters. Feel free to let me know how you think the characters would do in these games, if there's like a skill or something that I missed, or who you think would really win if they did this. Obviously this time I left it more up to like randomization and luck, how it would be in the real games, but that is how it went, and that is all for this video, and I'll see y'all in my next.